Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I have a bit of a different background today because I'm trying out something new on Zoom. I hope you're enjoying it. It is a photo that I took myself of Abu Simbel in Egypt. Today we have another video in my Ask an Archaeologist series. I am interviewing Will, who works as a professional archaeologist in the northeastern US, primarily in the state of New York. Previously on my channel, I interviewed Taylor, another US professional archaeologist who's working more so to the west in the Great Basin area. And we spoke a little bit there about the differences in the geographic regions in the US and the implications that this has on archaeology. So I'm really excited to speak today to Will and see what those similarities and differences might be. If you haven't seen my interview with Taylor, I have it linked here and in the description box below. Before we begin, don't forget to show your support for my channel and what I do here by subscribing to the channel. Also, if you like this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, as this really helps me out with the algorithm and making sure that more people can see the video and what we're doing here. Okay, guys, let's dig in. Welcome to the channel, Will. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have another American archaeologist on the channel to speak to because actually a huge part of my audience is American, and I'm based in the UK, and I usually talk a lot on UK-based topics. We're going to jump right into our first question, which is what inspired you to study anthropology at university?
So it's a little bit more roundabout than a lot of the other answers that you tend to get. I didn't really have any idea that being an archaeologist was a job.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Prior to my studies at university, I thought it was just a movie thing, to be honest with you. But when I first went to university, I was in a interdisciplinary engineers and art sciences program. That's what they called it, ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So I studied mechanical engineering with a focus in aerospace and anthropology because they
Mm-hmm.
forced me to choose some sort of art science to make my degree a little more well-rounded.
Mm-hmm.
And I was lucky enough to have a wonderful advisor, Alison Mickle, who is still working at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania. My first class with her was Archaeology of Middle East, and it
Mm-hmm.
was incredible. I loved it. And one semester later, I dropped the engineering half of my degree and instead focused on anthropology. And then I
Mm-hmm.
transferred to Binghamton University in the SUNY system in New York and finished out my degree there.
So you did anthropology. So how did you then end up kind of with an archaeology focus, or was there a specific type of archaeology that you were really interested in?
So I'm really interested in bioarchaeology. When I went to Binghamton, I was presented with two options: either take 5 years to finish my degree and get a BA, or
Mm-hmm.
finish my degree in 4 years with a BS, because I had all of these science cognates already completed because of my
Mm-hmm.
engineering background. So because of that, a lot of the classes that I finished my degree with were lab related: bioarchaeology, zooarchaeology,
Mm-hmm.
human skeleton, things like that. And because of that, I was really interested in bones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get that.
Hmm.
I have a degree, I have a master's degree in osteo. So
Hmm.
what draws you to bioarchaeology?
It feels a little more personal.
Mm-hmm.
Finding artifacts is obviously a big part of our jobs, but if you're excavating a tomb, for
Mm-hmm.
example, which I did when I was working in Mallorca,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like you can connect with it a little more.
So you mentioned Mallorca, which I think we'll come to in a second, but you finished your studies at university, so then you graduated and you've mentioned working in archaeology. So how
Mhm.
did you end up doing that?
So another roundabout product, I guess you could call it. I did a field school, as we're
Mhm.
all required to do in the US, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure if you have to do field schools elsewhere as well.
Yeah,
Do you? Yeah.
I had a 6 week minimum field school requirement
Yep.
as a part of my degree in Canada.
So, middle of COVID, I just transferred to Binghamton,
Mhm.
and I was told that I needed to complete this field school if I wanted to get a degree in anthropology with a focus in archaeology.
Mhm.
So I went to archaeologyfieldwork.com, and they've got
Okay.
a little locator for field schools near you. And one of them
Mhm.
was instructed by Kevin McBride at the University of Connecticut. And I reached out and I said, hey, I know I'm late for signing up for this, but would it be possible to participate? He said, sure, got one more spot. You're welcome to join us. So I did that. And then at the end of the field school, which was this really neat contact era Pequod domestic site.
Okay.
So that was really neat. He said, if anybody wants to stick around and keep volunteering, or if they want to get some work experience, one of the guys that I worked with, who was one of his PhD students, I believe, owns a cultural resources management firm in Connecticut. If you want a job there, you've got a job there.
All
And
right.
so I took him up on that my junior year of college, and I've worked there on and off ever since. I'm full time there now.
So did you ended up working there like during the summers in between your studies or?
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I know of several people who did that for in a similar situation. For my undergraduate university, one of our professors had started a CRM company in Canada, and if you had classes with him and he liked you, you could get a job during the summer. How did you end up in Mallorca? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Similar to the whole COVID dilemma, I had very little to do. School
Mm-hmm.
was online,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up cleaning data, both LiDAR data and XRF data, for a chemistry professor at the University of Portland. And the data that she had was from the site in Mallorca,
Mm-hmm.
Palencia, near the city of Alcudia. And she reached out in the spring of 2022 and said, "Hey, Will, you were really interested in the site when we were working
Mm-hmm.
on it. I know you cleaned a lot of data. We're actually going there this summer. Do you want to join us?" And
Mm-hmm.
of course I said yes.
So when you say cleaning data, what does that necessarily involve?
A lot of the work that I was doing was using programs like MeshLab and Agisoft Metashape
Mhm.
to both stitch together photos, photogrammetry, as well
Okay.
as LiDAR meshes.
Yeah.
So 3D scans of some of the artifacts, some of the tombs.
So did you get into kind of the more data driven like computer software side? Do you think that came about because you have all of this experience with engineering, or was that something that you came into through your program?
Definitely something that I came into through the program. I'm really interested in remote sensing techniques,
Okay.
like GPR,
Yeah.
and LiDAR tends to fall under the same technological umbrella, although
Hmm.
it's not exactly the same. It's all GIS.
So going back to Mallorca, can you tell us a little bit more about the site there, how long you were there for, and what you were doing?
So the site, like I said, it's the Roman city of Palencia,
Hmm.
which, if I remember correctly, it was founded in the first century BC,
Okay.
and then it burnt down in, I think, 123 AD. There's a forum there referred to as Confanals, which is just the farm that was there prior to the discovery of or rediscovery of the town. There's a necropolis nearby that was pretty active during the ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th centuries. They believe that there is a basilica there, but
Okay.
that hasn't been confirmed yet. But yeah, it's a pretty cool site with, both the forum and the necropolis as well as a domestic area. There's a small amphitheater,
Were you primarily working on the necropolis there?
primarily on the necropolis, yeah.
Okay. So you got to excavate lots of tombs, like you were saying.
Yes.
Oh, that must have
Many,
been
many
really,
tombs.
it must have been exciting. All right. So coming back from Mallorca, you then start working in CRM archaeology in the New England area. So you said primarily New York. Tell us a little bit more about how CRM operates in that area.
So just like a little bit of background of
Hmm.
cultural resources management in the States.
Hmm.
The only reason I have a job is because of Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, which
Hmm.
basically says anytime there's a federally funded or federally assisted project, in order to receive that funding, whoever's doing the project needs to confirm that they're not disturbing any historic or prehistoric sites,
Hmm.
which is basically the whole founding of cultural resource management.
Yeah, that's really similar to what Taylor was saying in that it's federally funded stuff. And he was saying, I think that he only works, well, pretty much all the time works on land that's owned federally. So is
Mhm.
that different for you, or do you ever end up working on private land?
In the Northeast, it's typically on private land.
That's a really interesting direct contrast.
Mm.
What kind of work are you doing? Is it primarily like walkover surveys, or are you doing lots of excavations?
For the most part, it's a lot of Phase 1As and Phase 1Bs, are both walkovers, pedestrian surveys, and preliminary excavations. Excavating shovel test pits, 50
Mhm.
centimeter by 50 centimeter pits on a usually 15-meter intervals, and the transects that we excavate are also on 15-meter intervals, so it makes sort of a grid within the AP, the area potential effect. Yeah.
And are the sites that you're working on, are they primarily historical or are they Native American?
Lately, it's a healthy mix. We also do a fair amount of Phase 2 excavations and Phase 3 data recoveries. And about a month ago, I'd say, I was working on this really interesting Phase 3 in Connecticut that
Mhm.
was, if I remember correctly, I think it was an early woodland site or late
Mhm.
archaic site. I don't work on a lot of historics. If we're
Mhm.
doing Phase 3s, it's typically pre-contact.
Okay. So, just for people who aren't necessarily aware, what do those kinds of sites look like? Because in my experience doing this kind of stuff in Canada, it's a lot of just like lithic scatters. You're just spending your whole time shoveling and looking for lithics in the ground. Is it similar to that, or do you guys find like longhouses or settlement kind of stuff?
I haven't had the pleasure of finding any post holes or
Okay.
features like that. Not yet, anyways. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
For the most part, it's looking for lithics,
Hmm.
debitage or any projectile points. If we can find a diagnostic, it makes everybody's day.
How are you enjoying it so far? What do you think?
I love it.
That's
Yeah,
good.
it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah.
It's a lot of driving for sure.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'm driving to a site in New Hampshire that's about 3.5 hours away.
Hmm.
So you got to get used to living on the road. It's a lot of
Hmm.
hotels, but it's certainly a lifestyle. It's
Hmm.
nice. I like it.
Are you able to be employed year round in that area?
Yeah, I believe the firm that I'm working for is actually one of the only firms in the Northeast that does do work year round.
Okay.
Typically around November, mid to late November, we'll take these concrete curing tarps. They're these insulated tarps, and we put them over areas that we plan on excavating. And
Mm.
then by the time we come back to them in, end of December, early January, when there's a foot and a half of snow on the ground, we can just shovel off all the snow, drag the tarps off, and the ground underneath them is not frozen, so we can excavate. I think for the last 5 years, the firm that I'm working for has had year-round employment.
Yeah. Glad to hear that you're enjoying CRM so far. Considering that you've only been in it for a year, do you have any ideas about maybe what you want to do with it in future? Do you want to keep doing CRM? Do you maybe want to go back for a PhD, or do you have like a specialty that you want to work towards?
Good question. For now, I think the best thing that I can do is just get more experience,
Hmm.
figure more about the process that which requires CRM. Get a better idea of how the field works. What the
Yeah.
industry is like. Keep
Hmm.
working, but it's definitely on my radar.
Hmm.
Considering, I think within the last month or two, Columbia released a statement of the cultural resources management industry for the next decade to come. And
Hmm.
given the new bill that our current president just released, which is, I believe it's called the Build Back Better program.
Hmm.
There is infrastructure planned for the next at least decade, which
Hmm.
means we've got work for at least the next decade.
Yeah.
But one of the caveats of that is that of the 11,000 new jobs that are going to be introduced to the CRM field, I think 6,000 of them are going to require at least a master's degree.
Yeah.
So if I don't want to keep being a shovel bum, I
Hmm.
might have to go back for a master's.
Oh, okay. On that note, considering that you were talking about bioarchaeology, is that something that you come across a lot in CRM in your area, and or maybe you could consider a master's in that?
It's not typically something that we come across that often.
Mhm.
No.
Moving on to kind of our next section, what are your best and worst like field experiences or like memories, like that one time when you were like, oh, I don't really know if this is for me, and that one time where it was like, this is exactly what I want to be doing for like the rest of my life.
What comes to mind immediately is working in the Plains region
Mhm.
out in North Dakota, South Dakota, a little bit in Montana. We didn't really dig, which
Mhm.
was weird for me because, coming out of college, it's like, all right, archaeology, it is always digging. If my hands aren't in the dirt, I'm not doing archaeology.
Mhm.
And then I get out west, if you can call that the West. And it's all these class two and class three pedestrian surveys. We're just walking through the
Mhm.
field with spacing,
Mhm.
looking for surface finds because there's not a lot of soil deposition.
Mhm.
So a lot of times you'll find an artifact that's been sitting on the ground that hasn't been touched in who knows how many hundreds to thousands of years.
Yeah.
So there's no real need to dig that deep. It's all
Mhm.
glacial moraine right on the surface. And there was one day in particular, we were working near Miles City, Montana. It was probably close to, if not exceeding 100 degrees Fahrenheit. We are like 3 or 4 miles into this 10-mile survey, and then we have to dead walk, which is, walking backwards without over a land that we've already surveyed.
Yeah.
And everybody was just miserable. We were hot,
Yeah.
tired. Everybody's out of water. The train, we called them PFUDs, pointless effing up and downs. Not sure how sensitive your channel is. That was definitely one of the worst days that I've experienced.
So then on the other side of it, best experience,
Yeah,
best day.
heavy contrast. The other side of the spectrum. would be working in New Hampshire in the middle of January. Maybe it was February at this point. It was just myself, my crew chief, and two other archaeologists. And we had set up these little carport tents over the areas that we were excavating. And we had propane heaters. It was a beautiful day. It was like 20 degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit. And we were warm because we had the heaters. And then the sun came out and we took a long lunch and we took those concrete tarps that I was talking about earlier and we stacked them on top of the screens and made sort of a futon. And the thing about this site is that it was overlooking a waterfall as well as a
Wow.
river. It was so nice to sit there and relax. And then, when you're done with lunch, you can just go back to picking out pieces of pottery and
Yeah.
lithics. And yeah, it was definitely one of the more picturesque sites that I've worked on. And that
Yeah.
made a pretty big difference
Yeah.
for me.
I don't think I've ever had an archaeologist say that their best day was during the winter. So that that's a great
Yeah,
answer. What is your favorite thing, artifact that you've discovered or found on a site?
that's kind of tricky. One of them was actually during my field school, a perfectly intact kaolin pipe, like
Okay.
a clay pipe that was decorated on one side, a man holding a musket, and on the other side, it was a man with a bow.
Hmm.
And keep in mind, this is a contact era Pequot site in Connecticut. So it was just so interesting to find this perfectly intact pipe that, was probably a trade item, and it had depictions of both, most likely, Englishmen holding a musket
Hmm.
and indigenous person holding a bow. It was just
Yeah.
so peculiar and well
Hmm.
preserved. It was a really neat find.
What would you say to encourage or inspire other people to follow in your footsteps coming into archaeology in the US?
I've had kind of a chaotic path to start. Definitely not the most direct, a little more roundabout, but I think it's made me a little more well-rounded. And
Hmm.
to people that were interested in the field, I'd say ask questions.
Hmm.
You know, talk to people.
Hmm.
If you're interested, express your interest because there are always opportunities to participate. If you
Hmm.
talk to a professor and say, "Hey, this really interests me,"
Hmm.
they might not have opportunities for it, someone, but odds are they know someone that does. And
Yeah.
that's the easiest way to get involved. Get involved, get involved, get involved. Get as much experience as you can, ask questions.
That's stuff I tell people all the time as well. Last question is, where can people follow you and your journey on social media?
At the moment, my only social media is an Instagram, but it is @where is William now?
Awesome. All right. Well, that ties up all of our questions today. That was nice and easy breezy. Thanks again for coming on the channel. And thanks everybody for watching. I hope that you've all enjoyed everything.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, guys, that's it for Will's interview today. What did you think? Was it what you expected? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to follow me and Will on social media. All the links to where you can find us are down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye.